I'm here at Ealing Town Hall, where inside the frontrunner in the Labour leadership contest, left-winger Jeremy Corbyn, is holding a rally this evening. In fact, they've just announced that not only is the main hall full, but also the overflow hall. So these people queuing outside are going to be disappointed. I think he might come out and address them separately at some point. So today marks the formal start of voting. Supporters are now starting to return their postal ballots, though it will be almost 4 more weeks before we know who's won. The former party leader, Ed Miliband, has ruled out intervening in the contest, but his brother, David, today said he'd be backing Liz Kendall. Though with Ms Kendall trailing in 4th in the polls, it's perhaps more significant that he said he'd give his second preference to the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. I've been speaking to Mr Corbyn, as well as looking into allegations about his links to a group run by a self-confessed Holocaust denier. But first, Paul Mason reports on the day's events.
When you're cold calling, the first rule is to smile.
JC number 1, yeah.
But for these Labour activists staffing the phone lines this afternoon, it was an effort. The weekend papers were full of worry, warnings, plots, revolts, underground resistance threatened should Jeremy Corbyn win. Liz Kendall, the Blairite choice for leader, has mastered the telephone manner, but she is trailing.
Thanks for your support. Bye. Bye.
The last poll put the candidate of the so-called modernisers on just 8%.
I'm the leader who will win power in order to give it away. We need a massive decentralisation of power in this country. I want to give people more power over their own lives, at work and over the services and in their communities. That is the big difference that I offer for Labour.
What about the growing left wing of your party, though? Suppose you do win. What institutional place can you offer to people like Jeremy Corbyn and his tens of thousands of supporters?
We need all these new members who've joined the party and as supporters to help us develop the right policies that are going to offer a big change from where we've been over the past 5 or 8 years, to become that grassroots movement that we desperately need to rebuild trust in communities, and we can't do that without all these new supporters and members who've joined.
If they'd stuck to the script, Andy Burnham would be leading the race. Instead, he's second and under pressure, tacking to the left, making this big overture to Jeremy Corbyn's supporters.
And of course, Jeremy has brought real energy to this race. I want to capture that and would involve Jeremy in my team from the outset.
In an alternative vote system where second preferences matter, that, basically, was the moment the anyone but Corbyn strategy disintegrated. According to the newspapers, this is a campaign about Corbyn versus anybody but Corbyn. But today shows that it's not. The other 3 candidates have serious differences they want to debate out, and significantly today, both Jeremy Corbyn and Andy Burnham have each said to each other and their supporters, "We could find a place for you if we win." In Ealing, London, which went Labour in May, this was the scene outside the Corbyn rally. Young, diverse Londoners mingling with the far left plus union stewards. In short, a new Labour nightmare.
Austerity is a political ideology and he's against that. So
do you think he can win, though?
Absolutely.
I mean, an election.
Of course. You've got 5 years till the next general election, and most people agree with this. Most people agree with renationalising railways. Most people agree with renationalising...
Do they really?
Yeah, there's polls that are out. Most people agree. Even conservative voters agree.
I trust this gentleman because he supports Iraq and Iraqis, and he was against dictator Saddam Hussein, and he was against war, and the Labour Party was, like you remember, Tony Blair, not against war. So I'm really happy to elected him.
Are you a member?
Yes. I paid to be a member, yeah. I just recently.
Well, Paul is with me now, and Jeremy's going to be blared out from that speaker in a minute, but they've gone off to find him. But still, these numbers are pretty extraordinary, aren't they?
Cathy, this is Ealing Town Hall. There's 400 people in one room waiting to hear him, another 150 in an overflow to see him on TV, and then probably 50 to 100 people waiting for him who's going to come out and speak to them. What his campaign organisers are not worried about is numbers. lots of people we've spoken to in this queue tonight have joined or become supporters of Labour to vote for Corbyn. What they're then worried about, though, is the solidity of this vote, because these are new people to politics. What they're up against are the party and political machines of Blairism, Brownism, all the other mainstream isms of Labour, and they can organise. What the Corbyn people are not sure is whether they're going to be able to organise these people to actually deliver victory. A lot of Corbyn's opponents are worried about, it's a done deal. The three other candidates do not believe it's a done deal, Cathy.
Paul, thank you very much. Well, despite calls from all sides for their supporters to refrain from personal attacks on their rivals, some of Jeremy Corbyn's backers are accused of pretty misogynistic and even anti-Semitic trolling of his opponents on social media. Mr. Corbyn's office has urged his supporters to avoid such abuse. But what of his own private views and associations? It's alleged he's given money to a man who denies the Holocaust, as I've been finding out. For decades, Jeremy Corbyn has been an outspoken campaigner for Palestinian rights. That's won him many friends. But his fervour for the cause has seen him accused of associating with some highly controversial groups and individuals, something to which the former Prime Minister alluded at the weekend.
And I have to say that if our global alliances are going to be alliances with Hezbollah and Hamas and Hugo Chavez's Venezuela and Vladimir Putin's Russia, there is absolutely no chance of building a worldwide alliance that can deal with poverty and inequality and climate change and financial instability, and we've got to face up to that fact.
Now questions are being asked about his links to this man, a self-confessed Holocaust denier. Paul Eisen, who's questioned the existence of the gas chambers, says Mr. Corbyn has given money to his group, which commemorates the Deir Yassin massacre, the killing of 100 Arab villagers by Zionist paramilitary groups. Mr. Corbyn's office has denied any dealings with Mr. Eisen, but the Labour leadership contender hasn't commented personally. At this Jewish cultural centre in North London, where Mr. Corbyn spoke at a hustings last month, there's a lot of concern about his views.
He's made it known that he's a friend of Hamas, and which is quite seriously worrying.
Labour will become unelectable.
I just don't give much stake to it. I think there's a smear campaign. I genuinely believe he's wholeheartedly anti-racist.
He's got some very strange views. I think he's in bed with a few people, like maybe people that are anti-Semitic.
The editor of the Jewish Chronicle says Mr. Corbyn must answer these concerns.
I think there's a deep sense of foreboding in the Jewish community about some of the people that Jeremy Corbyn associates with, whether it's a Holocaust denier, whether it's someone convicted of anti-Semitic incitement. I'm not accusing him of being an anti-Semite. What we want to know is answers to the questions. Why have you associated with some of these people?
Hey, how you doing?
Questions too about whether he's done enough to rein in the vitriol of his supporters on social media. One Labour MP says he's had anti-Semitic abuse from Corbyn backers, while leadership rival Liz Kendall has been subjected to misogynist invective. Mr. Corbyn's office has urged his fans to follow his own positive example.
Others, and at the same time subsidising.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn has just come out of the town hall. He's about to address the rally in there, but he's first speaking to people here who haven't been able to get in. Let's hear what he's got to say.
And become a number of things. One is a much more democratic organisation, so that every member of the party at any level...
Well, just before he began his rally here tonight, I caught up with him around the corner in an alleyway because he was being besieged by photographers. I began by asking him about the David Miliband's comments earlier today. There have been quite a few allegations about your links to individuals and groups of various descriptions. Have you ever donated to a group run by the Holocaust denier Paul Eisen?
I have no contact whatsoever now with Paul Eisen and Deir Yassin Remembered. I did attend a number of events concerning Deir Yassin Remembered some years ago, I think 2 or 3 of them. The only donation, if I made any, would have been in a collecting bucket going around the room. That would be all. Deir Yassin was a village that was destroyed on the establishment of the State of Israel, and the villagers remember that very much, and I think it's reasonable that we should remember all those people whatever side, who've suffered in the Middle East if we're to bring about a peace process in the long term.
But the Day Yassin Remembered group is run by a Holocaust denier, and he has a slightly different memory of your involvement. He says, one evening 15 years ago, I cycled over to see you. I was just beginning to establish Day Yassin Remembered in the UK, and I wanted him to join. I'd hardly begun my feverishly rehearsed pitch before his checkbook was on the table.
I have no recollection of any checkbook on the table. 15 years ago, he was certainly not a Holocaust denier. Had he been a Holocaust denier or stated he was, I'd have had absolutely nothing to do with him. I was, however, moved by the plight of people that had lost their village in Deir Yassin. Obviously, Holocaust denial is vile and wrong. The Holocaust was the most vile part of our history. The Jewish people that were killed by the Nazi Holocaust were the people that suffered the most in the 20th century. My generation have stood against racism. My mother stood in Cable Street alongside the Jewish people and the Irish people who were opposing the fascists at that time. We all have a duty to oppose any kind of racism wherever it raises its head, in whatever form it raises its head.
So it was a misjudgment then, was it, to chuck the money in the bucket but for this man who was a Holocaust denier?
At that time, I had no evidence whatsoever that Paul Eisen was a Holocaust denier.
So you regret giving to his group now?
Well, if he was a Holocaust denier at the time, yes. Whatever happened to that memorial fund, obviously, I don't know. It's a long time ago. But as far as I'm concerned, many of us who are very concerned about the situation in Palestine and with the Palestine Solidarity Campaign absolutely refuse to have anything to do with anyone who is a Holocaust denier. It is ludicrous and wrong.
So you regret also, I assume, describing Raed Salah as a very honoured citizen, given that he was convicted of the anti-Semitic slander that Jews use the blood of children to make their bread.
Raed Salah is an Israeli citizen and travelled to this country from Israel in a perfectly open way. The Israeli government made no steps to stop him. He arrived in Britain, addressed a couple of meetings about the situation of Palestinians within the state of Israel. The issue was, he was objected to by one Conservative MP, Mike Freer. 2 days later, the Home Secretary then issued an order for his detention. He was indeed detained. He challenged that and was released by a British court and then returned to Israel. I did meet him under house arrest. We had quite a long conversation about multi-faith objectives, about the rise of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, and I made my views very clear. He did not at any stage utter any anti-Semitic remarks to me whatsoever during that conversation.
But he's been convicted of the blood libel, that Jews use the blood of children to make their bread, and you've described him as an honoured citizen.
Had he been convicted, then I'm surprised that at that time, I'm surprised the Israeli government allowed him to travel.
But he had been convicted, yes. And you described him as an honoured citizen.
I was unaware of that at the time.
In another misjudgment? Or
no, I'm sorry, you're putting an awful lot of words into my mouth about misjudgment. My point is that any form of racism in any situation is absolutely wrong. We're all agreed on that. The need to talk to people is absolutely right if you're to bring about a peace process. Raed Salah was allowed to travel by the Israeli government, and so if they had concerns, presumably they'd have stopped him travelling. They stopped plenty of other people travelling, and he went back, and he's now in Israel.
Jeremy Corbyn, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.